Welcome back to another Physicist Review. This time I'm covering a game that you probably already own because it was given out for free by Epic Games a while back, but perhaps you didn't have time to try it out by now. Our game this time is Rising Storm 2 Vietnam, a semi-realistic multiplayer FPS set in the, you guessed it, Vietnam War. It was developed by Antimatter Games and published by Tripwire Interactive. So let's jump right in. Please enjoy. The Vietnam War in the gaming landscape is not very often depicted. And what was depicted of the Vietnam War via the medium of video games certainly never became a pop culture hit compared to those depicting World War II, such as Medal of Honor or Call of Duty. Perhaps it's how the two wars are remembered by the masses through the lens of movies that give them two distinct identities. Movies set in the Vietnam War without a clear villain certainly were more about the human condition and how the horrors of war affects oneself, whereas World War II movies could depict valiant men defending the world against tides of darkness. Something not too dissimilar to a scene from The Lord of the Rings where the armies of men bravely fight against the Dark Lord Saruman's evil horde at the Black Gate. Therefore, a video game set in World War II could follow in the footsteps of the popular movies and depict your valiant hero rescuing prisoners of war, sabotaging secret enemy weapons facilities, or storming the beaches of France, and sell pretty well without dipping too much into the horrors of war, and even cut down on blood and gore and lower its age ratings. However, the same approach did not work for the couple of video games that tried the same for the Vietnam War. Because the popular culture does not view the two wars from the same lens, a Vietnam War game would need to have the same gritty tones of the movies and put you in the shoes of a person going through a meat grinder with little to no chance of survival. Rising Storm 2 captures this essence of being in a horrible war perfectly. The time frame of the game starts from 1965 with the US intervention in Vietnam and ends at 1975 with the actual end of the war. The two main factions of the war are depicted as North Vietnam and South Vietnam in-game, with People's Army of Vietnam and National Liberation Front, aka Viet Cong, forming the in-game playable North Vietnam armies. Meanwhile, the US Army, the US Marine Corps, the Australian and New Zealand Corps, and the Army of the Republic of Vietnam forms the in-game playable South Vietnam armies. And before playing this game, I had no idea that Australia and New Zealand sent troops to fight in Vietnam. The game is a multiplayer-only FPS, very similar to Battlefield franchise in terms of its map and player counts. The play spaces are usually large open-ended maps with up to 64 players in a server, offering a 32 versus 32 health scale. Once players enter into a game and choose a team, they then get to pick a soldier class. The standard infantry armed with a rifle and a grenade is always available to all players with no limit, but the remaining classes are capped at a certain count to keep the gameplay balanced so you don't have the problem of literally everyone running around with sniper rifles or rocket launchers. After picking your class, you then jump into the game. Your objective is usually pretty simple. If you are the attacking side, you need to capture a zone designated on your map by standing inside it with superior numbers. And if you're the defending side, then your job is to not let the attackers capture your points. And that's really the premise, as long as you approach the game with the mindset that you are a slab of walking meat able to hold a rifle, completely disposable and easily replaceable with other slabs of meat with functioning limbs, then congratulations, you're getting the intended horrors of war experience I was talking about. The gameplay, in its essence, is not too different from any other first-person shooter. You have a weapon in your hand to shoot at enemies. You can run, crouch, crawl, lean, drop, or pick up weapons from the ground, and finally, you can also die. The semi-realism aspect of Rising Storm 2 is what sets this game apart from the likes of Battlefield and Call of Duty. The interaction between bullets and humans is pretty realistic. Getting shot once in the upper torso or the head is an instant kill, no matter what gun or type of bullet is being used. Being hit in the lower torso, arms, or legs is survivable, but usually necessitates a very lengthy bandaging process, which you presumably have to perform under fire, being unable to move. If you don't bandage in time, then you pass out and die from blood loss. Your character behaves and controls like a real person. Their speed is determined by the weight of the weapons they are carrying. They get tired after sprinting for long distances and wobble their gun unless you rest for a bit. Being shot at by the enemy makes your character suppressed, they get afraid and have shaky hands, affecting their aim. The weapon they hold is also a physical, real thing in the game world, as in, it occupies a certain space, so you can't press it up against walls. The bullets actually come out of the gun barrel and have proper trajectories adhering to gravity and their respective velocities, requiring sometimes leading your shots. If you position yourself incorrectly, you can obstruct the barrel of the gun but still see through the iron sights. Pulling the trigger in this state will cause you to hit the barricade or the dirt patch in front of you. But the game thankfully tells you when the barrel is obstructed with an icon on the screen, so you don't get frustrated with this. Additionally, you can also prop up your weapon on walls, windows, sandbags, corners while leaning and stabilize your aim greatly. And some weapons even come with bipods for deploying on all sorts of surfaces. The weapons can also change their firing modes, much like in real life. If the weapon has a specific fire mode in real life, then it will also be accurately depicted and be changeable in the game. Something as useless as the BAR's fast full auto or slower full auto functionality is fully simulated in the game. But for other weapons, it's usually going to be changing from fully automatic fire to single shot fire for 90% of them. For engagement ranges longer than 50 meters, the recoil of the weapons makes full auto fire almost impossible to hit targets, so it's much better to switch to single fire to improve your chances of hitting and also conserving your ammo. Oh, and did I also mention that the game doesn't have the magic ammo pool reload nonsense that other shooters have? Firstly, there is no magic number count on your HUD showing you the exact number of bullets in your weapon. You instead hold the reload key and your character physically takes out and checks the approximate number of rounds left in your magazine. It's a really cool mechanic if I say so myself. Or alternatively, you can actually count how many times you have shot if it's like a bolt-action rifle or a shotgun with very low bullet capacities. Secondly, the game actually keeps track of how many bullets are inside every single magazine you have in your pockets. Let's say you have 2 magazines of 30 rounds in your pockets and one 30-round magazine in your gun. When you shoot 10 rounds and reload the gun, that magazine with 20 rounds left goes back into your pockets and gets reloaded back in with those 20 rounds if you keep changing magazines like a madman, like in other shooters. So sometimes it's better to empty out your magazines with few bullets left, especially when on the offensive, to avoid reloading a half-full magazine later on. Or alternatively, you can go back to one of the resupply crates on the objective zones to fully rearm yourself again. These semi-realism changes makes the fast run-and-gun paced playstyle as found in other traditional multiplayer FPS games in the market very risky to use in Rising Storm 2. Instead, the game emphasizes, at least on defense, digging into very strong and concealable positions and holding choke points with your teammates. While on attack, it emphasizes correct usage of smoke grenades for covering your team's advance, and good coordination between the team's commander player and the rest of the team regarding key artillery strikes on enemy defenses. However, there are times when sacrifices must be made in order to just get more bodies on the control point to capture it. Therefore, you may just have to run through the hail of enemy bullets with enough people and hope that you make it because there is only 1 minute left on the match timer, thus it's the only viable tactic left. While the maps are designed with gameplay in mind, they tend to be realish battlegrounds with positions of cover often being concentrated in the capture zone benefiting the defending team, while the attacking team is required to move through an exposed area to reach the objective the shortest way. But there are flanking routes on the sides of the objective, where small numbers of soldiers can sneak or sometimes shoot their way through the defending team's flank watch. This makes it vitally important for either team to know where the bulk of the enemy forces are concentrated at, and where there are gaps in their lines to exploit. The Commander class's recon planes do exactly that, but you can hide from planes by laying on the grass and not shooting. And anti-air sights can be routinely called to take out any flying vehicle. Lone Wolf playstyle, while not totally impossible, is still discouraged for the majority of the players. Realistically, only sniper classes and maybe the recon classes can benefit their teams via such playstyles. Meanwhile, a machine gunner is best utilized getting suppressive fire on the enemy position rather than lone wolfing. So staying aware of your team and using in-game chat and voice options to communicate are pretty important. The atmosphere depicted in the game can be beautifully horrifying. You have the colorful lush forests and landscapes of Vietnam, brutally ravaged and destroyed by napalm, leaving behind burnt-out forests and craters for men to die in. There are the water-filled soggy rice fields, offering concealment or a watery grave to the troops. The long-abandoned civilian villages now turned into close-quarters fighting arenas. The North Vietnamese tunnels dug into the hills act as their new makeshift homes. And the US Army encampments built on top of hills with wood are not too dissimilar to ancient Roman war encampments. With helicopters doing strafing runs, flamethrowers burning down bunkers, troops throwing grenades down tunnel networks to clear out stragglers, machine guns mowing down people through the wooden walls of buildings, with men on fire screaming or bleeding out on the floor gurgling out their last gasps of air left in their lungs, the game manages to catch a tiny glimpse of the horrifying brutality of war. The two factions in the game, North and South Vietnam, are not identical to one another, and the game actually has an asymmetrical balance aspect going for it based on the real-life conflict itself. One difference is the faction-specific respawning mechanics. The South Vietnam factions have spawning on squad leader as an option. This means that keeping a squad leader alive and inside enemy territory is the best way of capturing objectives. The North Vietnam instead digs tunnels at a stationary place on the map. This means that if the squad leader himself gets killed, it's not a major loss for the squad, as they can spawn in the tunnel close to the objective, but the enemy scouts can see the tunnels when they are close by and can destroy them. Speaking of tunnels, there are actual tunnel systems built into some maps where the North Vietnam troops can use their primary assault rifles inside them, but when the South Vietnam troops enter in, they can only use their weaker pistols. Although from what I've seen in game, this rarely comes into play, as these pistol-only tunnels are kind of arbitrarily placed and don't apply to all tunnels. Kind of a wasted game mechanic in my opinion. The commander powers are also different based on the factions. While both factions have access to a basic artillery strike, the South Vietnamese can call special napalm airstrikes that linger for longer periods on the map, denying access to certain areas. South can also call upon AC-130 gunships for raining down bullets and has access to a recon airplane that can show non-concealed enemy locations on the map, and certain maps have a special pilot role available for one attack helicopter and one troop transport helicopter. The North Vietnam has the aforementioned anti-air missiles to combat the flying nuisances. They have infantry scouts for showing the enemy location on the map, which cannot be shot down like a plane. And finally, the North Vietnamese commander player has the ability to instantly spawn every single dead player on their team on their own location, called the surprise ambush. And this can lead to really clutch ninja capture plays on some objectives. Perhaps the most notable difference is the weaponry available to the factions. The North Vietnam has access to a whole messy hodgepodge of an arsenal, with all types of Soviet AKs and SKS rifles, World War II era American M1 carbines and BARs, Russian World War I era Mosin Nagant bolt-action rifles, double-barreled shotguns presumably from civilian farmers, captured French SMGs from the initial French involvement in Vietnam, World War II era German MP40s, Soviet RPGs and so on. And all the basic infantry can dig one punji trap on the ground for unsuspecting trap kills. Meanwhile, the South has access to mostly American weaponry with era-appropriate M14s, M16s, or Rambo's famous M60 machine gun. And some older World War II weaponry revised during the Korean War, such as the M2 carbine, the M3 grease gun, the Tommy gun, some pump-action shotgun variants, and finally the Australian variants of the FN-FAL and the Australian-specific SMGs like the Oven gun. Now, in a regular match, you can choose whatever weapon you want to use available to your class, which means you'll probably choose an AK as North Vietnam and an M16 as South Vietnam forces, as these two are the best all-rounded weapons available to the factions, since they have high magazine capacities, they can also fire in full auto for suppression or for close quarters battle, they are relatively quick to reload, and the assault rifle caliber bullets means that you are more likely to kill someone at longer ranges when hitting them at the lower torso or the limbs. You may find it weird that the game lets you choose statistically inferior weapons if you would like to do so. But there is an actual reason why these inferior weapons are included in the game, besides from historical immersion and actually finding it cool to use a double-barreled shotgun like you're the Doom guy. But yeah, the real reason is actually a very unique campaign mode some servers can actually choose to run instead of running individual maps. The campaign mode starts the game up from the year 1965 and the campaign ends in 1975. Each year represents one gameplay match for the players in the game, but I believe the length of the campaign can be set by the server itself because I have seen campaigns that were really short and I have seen other campaigns where a single year had like 3 matches inside. When a team wins a match, they get to decide on the territory map where to attack or to defend next. All players in the lobby vote on their decision and then the next match begins. What this year system does is that it divides the war into 3 distinct periods. First one is the early war period where all factions have only access to their inferior weapons mentioned above. And this really stings a lot for the North Vietnamese because they don't get to have their AKs and must make do with the SKSs and the M1 carbines. The second period is the mid-war period, where the faction finally gets their superior weapons on their basic infantry, but they are only limited by interesting factors such as 18-round small box magazines on the M16s for the US Army. The Australian faction is also available to be played in the second period together with their unique weaponry. And finally, you have the late war period, starting from 1973, where the American and Australian forces are withdrawn from Vietnam. So obviously, the South Vietnam faction can only pick the Army of Republic of Vietnam to play as. But otherwise, all weapons with their gizmos and gadgets are available to both sides so that the meat grinder can work in full efficiency. Once the calendar hits 1975 on the campaign and the final match has been played, the game, judging from your previous victories, chooses a final side as the victor, so you can kind of get into an alternate reality sort of deal with the game. With all of these cool aspects to the campaign mode, I still have to mention a gripe I have with it. Starting a campaign from 1965 and going through to the end at 1975 means at least 10 matches you have to play consecutively. So this means at least 5 to 7 hours of non-stop gaming to complete one whole campaign. Now it's not impossible to do so, but very unlikely for the majority of people. So what really ends up happening is that people jump into a campaign server, play 1 or 2 matches, and that's that for them. They leave the server and all of the above mentioned mechanics only become a random occurrence in the match that they were playing. Before concluding the video, I wanted to get into some of the technical sides of the game. If you managed to get this far into the video, then chances are you're somewhat intrigued by the game and are considering trying it out at least a little, especially if you grabbed it for free. The game runs on the good old Unreal 3 engine, and it is pretty well optimized to run on older hardware. So it's very likely that a 10-year-old computer or a weak laptop to be able to run it at 720 to 900p resolution with low to medium settings and get around 30 to 40 frames per second. From personal experience, I can tell you that getting around 40 FPS is okay for this game since it's slower paced, and anything above 60 is really overkill for this particular game. One thing I strongly recommend is that installing the game on a solid state drive, also known as SSDs. The game has very long loading times otherwise. Initially, I had it installed on a mechanical hard drive and I was waiting up to 3 minutes for a map to load. Once I moved the game to an SSD, the loading times dropped down to 10 to 15 seconds maximum. However, if you are unfortunate enough to be stuck with a mechanical hard drive, then turn every texture and shadow related setting to low from the options menu, as it helps a little bit with loading times. Speaking of textures, there is an option in the video settings called the texture pool size. Set this to unlimited if you want the game to not have blurry looking textures. For some reason, this always gets set to 2 GB by default whenever I tried, and even setting up to 4 GB didn't get rid of the blurriness. Just set it to unlimited and forget about it. That is, unless you're using a really old GPU with 1 GB of VRAM or you're stuck with Intel HD graphics, then yeah, set it to 1 GB. In conclusion, Rising Storm 2 is a very competent, semi-realistic Battlefield-style multiplayer FPS able to depict an authentic feeling Vietnam War. So far, it is the best video game I have played in this setting alone. And if you're a bit tired from the AAA multiplayer shooters of late with their arcadey feeling gameplay mechanics and would like to try out something a little bit different for a change, or if you're already into milsim or tactical shooters such as Arma, Squad or Insurgency and want to check out something with a different time period, then Rising Storm 2 comes with high praise and recommendation from me. At the very least, check the game out if you managed to grab it for free previously. I would like to thank you for watching my video. If you enjoyed the content, please like the video and subscribe for more content in the future. Please take care of yourselves, and I'll see you in the next video.